Welcome to my channel where we cover the lore of video games. We cover all kinds from the mainstream to the indie, so I hope you enjoy your stay, and welcome to the Chronicler of Lore. When the Warrior of Light meets back up with Varshan and Razad-Han, he still hasn't heard anything from Y'shtola about a new method of getting back to the Void. The lack of information has been making him antsy, and he's not the only one. Estinian has been so bored that he's been volunteering to help train soldiers without even complaining a little bit, which is very out of the ordinary for him. Zero has been spending her extra time restoring her ether. In other words, she's been eating a lot. She's about to head out to do just that, and she invites you to come along, which is kind of out of the ordinary for her. Varshan was planning on going through the city anyway, so he decides to tag along too. After picking up some spices, because while the people of Razad-Han like their food to have a bit of kick, nobody likes their food as spicy as Zero does, so she likes to bring her own ingredients for a curry. She grabs enough to make some for everyone at the restaurant to have a bit too, and while the old Zero wouldn't be all that eager to share, this more people-friendly version of her isn't against the idea. Granted, I think the real reason she's fine with sharing is because most people's tongues would burn off if they try to eat her food. Because the Warrior of Light is good at everything, she's perfectly fine with eating a bowl of fire while the rest of the patrons are very nearly dead from it. Varshan decides to bring some food to Estinian, but he doesn't bring the curry because apparently the dragon doesn't think his reaction to it will be all that funny. The Dragoon's in his room shirtless and sweaty doing push-ups on his fingers like a boss, and Zero proves that not only has she started liking food since she's been staying on the source, but she also seems to have a thing for half-naked sweaty men. Since Estinian was already half-naked, her first thought was to join him. Unfortunately, Varshan proves that dragons are the worst wingmen and he doesn't let the woman get naked. Once Estinian's finally put some clothes on, Y'shtola shows up, and she's brought Urianger with her. She's finally figured out a way to get back to the 13th, and since learning said information took a trip to the moon, she decided to get some help from Urianger. After she brought him up to speed on everything you've all been doing, he was more than willing to join in on the mission to save Ashdaya. From what Rubicante said, both Golbez and Ashdaya are on the moon of the 13th, and while you have the means of going back and forth to the moon from the source, even if you went back to the Void, you wouldn't have a way to get to the moon there. So Y'shtola figured it'd be better to cut out the middleman and open a gate straight from the source's moon to the 13th's. Granted, doing that could make a way for Void Scent to come through to the source, so Y'shtola got Urianger to help her figure out a way to handle that not so little problem. Since they're working on the moon, he decided to get the Loporrits and the Watcher to help too. Y'shtola's figured out how to actually open the gate, which is definitely the more difficult objective, and she thinks her method will only work because she's doing it on the moon. There's a lot of stuff that she'll need to pull it off, including a whole lot of ether since the hole has to be large enough for two very large dragons to go through. And the way she plans on getting the ether there is by using the Tower of Babel in Garlemald. Fandaniel had used it to break Zodiark's prison. Now she wants to use it to open the Void Gate. She's gonna head back up to the moon to set up the means of using the ether, but she'll need help from Varshan's alchemist again, namely Nadana. She wants Estinian to play the role of bodyguard for them since a trip to Garlemald isn't exactly safe, and he's more than eager to do anything that gives him the opportunity to get a bit of action. Urianger is gonna handle all the preparations planetside, and he's gonna need your help. Once Varshan switches to his more useful vessel, Urianger lets you all know the full details of the plan. While Y'shtola and the others get stuff set up on the moon, you all have to get the ether you need and get it to the Tower of Babel. The tower was able to draw ether from the land, so using it to shoot ether to the moon won't be all that hard. But drawing ether from the land is not exactly healthy for the planet, so you'll have to find a different way to get it. The second mission is getting the Garleans to actually let you use the tower. The Ilzabar contingent is in control of the thing, and with all of the destruction that it caused the last time it was used, they might not be willing to let you play around with it. Varshan doesn't think it'll be all that hard to convince them once you tell them what you're working on. He thinks finding a place to gather all the ether that you need will be harder, but Urianger already has a place in mind. There's an island called Ham near Sharlayan. The place has so much ether that it sprays out in geysers. That was the island that the Sharlayans had planned on using to power the Ragnarok spaceship, but we ended up using other means to power the ship, so none of the ether from the island had been used. That means all you need to do is ask the forum and they should let you get as much as you need. Zero's not all that fond of having to ask permission to do literally everything because it's kind of annoying, but that's just how things work when you're dealing with governments and stuff. Normally the Scions would be able to avoid a lot of the red tape, but since they've officially disbanded, that bit of freedom is gone. However, you do have access to the students of Baldessian, so you all head to Old Charlian to talk to Crow. When you get there, she's in the middle of talking to everyone's favorite gleaner, Aaronville. He and Crow swap stories every now and then, and since he travels the world a lot, he constantly sees things that the students would be interested in. He's about to be gone on an extended trip, so he came by to talk to Crow before he left. For once he's not headed off on gleaner business, this time he's going home. He seems eager to head off, but since he knows the islands, Varshawn decides to tell him about what you're all working on. It was a good idea to ask him since he's been almost everywhere, but it turns out that one of the few places that he hasn't been is the Isle of Ham. The place is under the direct control of the Forum, so very few people are allowed to ever go there. That means you'll be going in mostly blind, but Crow can at least handle the whole getting you access thing. You still need to figure out how to collect the ether that you'll need, so that means you'll have to talk to someone who was involved with building the spaceship. There's a researcher named Margaret who worked on the ship's engines, so she's likely your best bet. And since you'll have to wait for Crow to deal with the Forum's paperwork, you all head off to find out how to collect the ether once you make it to the Isle. Margaret, like most sciencey types, is always happy to talk about her work, so she tells you everything you need to know about the special tanks that they made to transport the ether off of the Isle. The things could hold a lot of ether, and she's kind of upset that they never got to use them after they spent all of that time making them. They've been stored somewhere, but she's not exactly sure where since stocking shelves isn't exactly in her job description. The person who does know is the mullet-having mustachioed Lalafell Kokal Dakal. Once you tell him why you need the tanks, he's more than happy to give them to you since you did save the world and all of that. So once Crow finishes with the Forum, you'll be good to go. She shows up with Alphino's dad in tow right when Kokal throws some insults at the Forum because of course she did. They've agreed to let you go to the Isle, but with the crazy amounts of ether that's flowing through the place, it's basically acted like steroids for the creatures living there, and they've gotten a bit bigger and more vicious. As payment to the Forum for letting you go, they want your group to kill as many of the overgrown critters as you can. Zero's surprised that they're charging you so little for the amount of ether that you plan on taking. But the Forum owes the students of Baldessian a lot considering you all stopped the final days, and they clearly don't like owing people, so they're trying their best to pay their debt off as soon as possible, which works out fine for you. They've already got your ship ready, so Kokal goes off to load up the tanks while you all get ready to head to the Island of Monsters and Ether. And right before you head off, your crew is joined by none other than Thancred, who it's always good to have around. As soon as the Scions step onto the Isle of Ham, they immediately see why the Forum wanted them to clear the place out. While some of the animals are cute like the Coca-Cola bears, most of them are the man-eating type that you see pretty much all over Eorzea. The place has everything from giant wolves to a kraken, so naturally the Scions do what they do best, and that's make living stuff breed less. Once you've made things a lot more safe, Kokal flies in with his crew and load up the tanks with ether, and he's even nice enough to have them shipped to Garlemald for you, which is good since that saves you from having to carry the things. They take a while to fill up, which gives Zero time to talk to Thancred about something that she hadn't ever been able to do: trust people. She hadn't even been able to do that before the 13th became the Void. The Memoriates got corrupted by their power, and they'd turn on pretty much anyone, so trusting them was a pretty good way to die. Everyone on the 13th fought alone, and they lost the same way. She wouldn't even know how to trust anyone, but she does want to learn. Thancred doesn't think he can teach her how to do it, but he figures that if she keeps hanging out with you, she'll understand it eventually. Once everything's done, Thancred heads off to get back to whatever he's been working on, while you all get ready to work on your second objective, and that's getting access to the Tower of Babel, so you all head off to Garlemald to talk to Lucia. Once Varshawn tells the woman what's going on, she lets you all know that it won't exactly be easy to activate the tower. The machinery itself is pretty hard to operate, but getting the people of Garlemald to let you use it is going to be kind of tricky. Most of the people who are still staying there are native Garleans, and they were never comfortable with people using ether for stuff. Not to mention the fact that the last time the tower was turned on, it caused quite a few bad things to happen, like the destruction of the entire nation. So if the thing suddenly turned back on, the people would freak out. Zero does point out that the alternative is waiting around for Golbez to invade with a planet full of void scent, which is a pretty good argument, but Maxima points out that most Garleans don't even understand the concept of magic or other worlds. It's not going to be easy to convince them of the gravity of the situation, especially since a lot of them would rather die than deal with magic. That's kinda stupid, so Lucia is willing to help you all convince the people, and the best way to get started with that is to talk to Alphinaud and Alizé. The Garleans trust them quite a bit, so they would be useful when it comes to getting people comfortable with the idea of activating the tower. While you track down the twins, Varshan wants Urianger to start making the tower run. The twins, like everyone else, are always glad to see you, and they agree with the fact that the Garleans won't really like the whole turning the Tower of Babel back on thing. Julius thinks it'll be a little worse than just not liking it. Quite a few of them might try to stick you with pointy objects if you mess with the thing. It's not like the Garleans and the Ilzabar contingent are the best of friends anyway. Their relationship is still pretty iffy, so anything can ruin what's being built. Alizé figures that the best thing you can all do is talk to the people to see exactly how they feel about it. Then you can try to make a deal that can benefit everyone. Since that's all you can do, Julius agrees to take you to meet the community leaders at a place called the Sonatas. Since Varshan's the leader of his own nation, he's the one who will go talk to the leaders to do a bit of politicking, while the rest of you, minus Zero, go talk to the common folk. Since Zero's a void sent, Varshan wants her to come with him to better help explain the threat. The twins head off to talk to some people in Tapper's Den while they leave Tertium to you. You didn't really need to talk to the people to find out that they'd rather you tear the tower down than use it, but some of them do remember the things you've done for them, so if you say it's necessary, they'd be behind you. Others are scared that if they go against the wishes of the Ilzabar contingent, the foreigners will cut off their food supply. The leaders of the Garleans Council, Naeus and Matthias, have been working on building a new government in Garlemald, and when Varshan mentioned the Tower of Babel, they decided they wouldn't say anything else until they talked to the representatives of the Ilzabar contingent. So Julius decided to bring them over to you. They came just to say that they're tired of foreigners being in their stuff and they want you all gone. The old Garlemald did fall, but it got destroyed by a civil war, not Eorzeans. They are officially going to reclaim their land and they want you all out of it. Considering their current economic situation, they know that's dumb, but if you start negotiating with some ridiculous demands, then you can at least get some of what you want. Varshan doesn't know all that much about the people of Garlemald and what they need to survive, but it doesn't take much to know that what they really want is their independence back. Having to rely on other nations for help isn't at the top of anyone's list of favorite things to do, but without the aid from the contingent, the Garleans would die, and they don't have too many ways around it. Zero thinks all of that could be solved if the contingent and the Garleans made an actual agreement, complete with terms and types of help that they'll offer, what the foreigners can and can't do on Garlean soil, and so on and so forth. Kind of like the concrete deals that Void Sent make, which gives Varshan an idea that he thinks will help everyone, but he wants to run it by Lucia and Maxima first. Since he runs Razad Han, he can set up a trade agreement between his nation and Garlemald. If the Garleans have a means of supply outside of the Ilzabar contingent, they won't feel like their country is being taken over by foreigners, and they won't feel like a charity case if they have their own stuff. Even during the war between Garlemald and Eorzea, the people of Razad Han had an agreement to where neither nation would interfere with what the other was doing, and they'd keep their trade going between their people. Varshan wants to get that back up and running. In exchange, the Garleans will let him use the Tower of Babel, and they will sell their Magitech to his people. The deal would help both nations, and Maxima thinks it'll be great. It may even help get other nations to join in too. When Varshan, with a little help from Maxima, explains his proposal to the two leaders of Garlemald, Matthias still doesn't agree to do it because he's an idiot, but Naeus is more receptive to the idea. Julius understands that Matthias doesn't want to have to accept that the old Garlemald is gone, but he does finally get through to him, and he decides to finish the talk with Varshan. Zero's still watching all of this unfold, and she's starting to understand more and more about how people can start to trust in others. She also starts to understand why that's a foreign concept on her world. Getting people to trust you requires you to put yourself at risk by trusting them first, and where she's from, that's a good way to get eaten. During the Contra Memoria, people will judge based off of how useful they were. If you didn't get that concept, then you died pretty fast. Zero's mother had wanted to save her world, so after she died, Zero tried to carry on the woman's mission on her own. There was only one time during her quest where two men tried to help her. She met them in a village after they had saved the people from some corrupted Memoriats, and when they saw that she was fighting the same people they were, they figured it'd be a good idea if she joined them. They had left their kingdom, a place called Baron, and they were looking for a way to end the Contra Memoria. It was a goal that lined up with Zero's own, but there was no way she'd trust the men to watch her back after all of the stuff she'd seen. So she left, and she was surprised that they let her go. In hindsight, their offer might have been genuine, and if she had teamed up with them, then she wouldn't have been left nearly dead when she had got crowded by a group of people. But she'll never know, because while she was bleeding in the snow, the world ended and she was sucked into the rift. When she made it back to the 13th, it had become the Void. She regrets having faced the end of the world alone, but she can't change it. What she can do is not throw away the opportunity to work with her new friends to possibly save her own world. But first you'll need to get access to the Tower of Babel, so you head off to see how the talks are going, so you can finally get back to the Void and stop Golbez. After a bit of negotiation between Varshan and the leaders of Garlemald, they finally come to a trade agreement that everyone agrees to. And because of that, they give the Warrior of Light and her friends what they want, and that's access to the Tower of Babel. That access couldn't have come at a better time since your ether tanks are almost there. Once the tower is full of ether, all that'll be left is to wait for Y'shtola's signal. Since she hasn't sent any word on her progress, Varshan figures that she might need some help, so since you're done on your end, you might as well head to the moon. Y'shtola did tell Urianger to let Varshan know that she thinks what his sister will need once you all make it back to the Void is her brother, not his vessel, but Vritra in his full Great Worm form. The portal will be big enough, so he thinks that's a good idea, and since he can fly through outer space with no problem, he'll meet you all on the moon. He leaves to go put his eye back into his real body and start the trip to the moon, but not before he gives Ashdaya's eye to you. He wants you to keep it until you save his sister. You all head off, leaving the twins to activate the tower when Y'shtola gives the signal. When you get there, Y'shtola and her team, which includes Nidana and Estinian, are happy for the extra help since she still has some work to get done. The Watchers helped her get her portal opening ritual set up, and now she needs the ether from the tower to hopefully open the portal. Her group had to use all of their considerable knowledge, but they also managed to figure out how to contain any void scent that comes through the soon-to-be open massive void gate. It was pretty easy to come up with once they thought about it. The moon had a machine that was able to hold Zodiark, so once you fix what Fandanio broke, it'll be the perfect void scent blockade. The Watcher's already working on fixing the things, so if you all help, it'll go faster. Y'shtola's positive that the barrier will stop all of the big critters that come through. The small ones might be able to squeeze through the barrier though, so she wants the Loporus to handle that. She wants you to go and talk to them, and Zero wants to come too, probably because everyone likes the moon bunnies and she wants to see why. Y'shtola's already told Livingway that she wants some of their best combat machines, so the other moon bunnies are already gathering them all up. The things look impressive, but they've never fought Void Scent before. Fortunately, you have your own personal Void Scent who is perfectly fine with testing the machines. Half of them run away when she powers up. The rest get beaten with absolutely no effort. The Loporus don't feel bad about that. Now that they've seen a Void Scent in action, they can make some machines that can do some damage, and they can do it pretty fast. Once they set off to get those upgrades started, Y'shtola calls to let you know that they've gotten everything ready, which means it's almost time to open the portal. Y'shtola gives a call to the twins and they activate the tower, sending over all of the ether. It's a lot of ether, but once it's there, Y'shtola does her job and tears open the biggest void gate ever made. Void Scent immediately try to come through, but the barrier does indeed keep them from passing out of the pit. Vritra finally arrives and he's even impressed with the size of the gate. Y'shtola, being the science-minded cat girl that she is, has been thinking that there has to be something about the source that makes opening portals to the shards possible that the other shards don't have, because they've never tried to merge with each other. She thinks the source is always pulling on the shards because it wants to draw them in, which means the void isn't the only shard that she'll be able to open portals to in the future. That's also why she thinks Hydaelyn was made with the power of light. Light stops things from changing, so her powers stop the source from drawing in the other shards. But since darkness fills the void and it counters Hydaelyn's powers, sometimes bits and pieces of it would break through to the source, making planar fissures. She focused all of the ether you gathered in the direction of the void to help create a really big gate, but she can't use the same technique to open a path to any other shards, so for now we still won't see her getting back to the first to be reunited with her cat daddy boyfriend. None of that is important right now. What is important is dealing with Golbez and saving Ashdaya, so you all hop on the Vritra's back and fly through the gate. The moon of the void looks way more dead and red than the one from the source, and there's not a void scent to be seen, which doesn't surprise Zero, since Golbez didn't let many people know where his domain was, let alone hang out there. Vritra can't sense his sister, so you all spread out and start looking for her. The only place that looks even remotely interesting is the hole where Zodiark was locked up. Somebody's built something down there, so it's probably the best place to look. The place used to hold a fragment of Zodiark, but when you beat him on the source, Y'shtola figured that every fragment of the primal would have disappeared, but she can sense some of his power coming from the hole, which is not a good thing. It's probably not a good idea to go flying into the hole either, but Vritra senses his sister from inside, so you all head down. Sure enough, you find Ashdaya trapped in a prison. She's out cold, but when you give her back her missing eye, she wakes up and is very surprised to see her brother there. Unfortunately, going back home with him won't be easy since not even a dragon can break the prison that Golbez locked her in. She's been locked up for a while, but she doesn't realize just how much time has passed until she notices her brother is traveling around with mortals, which is more than a little odd for her kind. At least it was the last time she saw him. When she first came to the Void, she was weak after fighting so many Void Scent, and it wouldn't have taken long for her to turn into one, but Golbez told her that he could stop that from happening. He did, but the price was locking her up and letting his people drain her ether forever. The only way to break the prison is to beat Golbez. She knows more about him than you do, obviously, and she's happy to share the info. For starters, he can't go too far from his domain, otherwise he wouldn't be able to sustain her prison. That's why he usually sends his minions out to do jobs for him, but every now and then he'll head to the surface of the moon and go to a very specific place to the south. Ashdaya doesn't know why, but she figures there's something there that's important to him, which means it's worth you all checking out, and since you can't free Ashdaya yet anyway, you all head off to see what you can find. You actually do find something important, a Memoria crystal, and when you hold it, the echo that you still don't know how to control takes over, and you see through the eyes of a man and his friend named Durant as they kill some corrupted Memoriates. They're on a quest to end the Contra Memoria and save the world, and it turns out that they just so happen to be the same two people who Zero had told you about. You see the moment where she turned down their offer to join them, which was in fact genuine, but they didn't blame her for not trusting them since their world does kinda suck. They had got a summons from their king anyway, so they headed off to Baron. When the vision ends and you tell Zero that the memory had her in it, she figures that the person in the crystal was one of the men she had met, but before she could think about which one it might be, Golbez shows up, and he brought Ashdaya. When Zero sees him, she realizes that he's wearing the same armor as one of the men she'd met that day. He's impressed that she managed to keep her form and her memories for this long, and since she's a Memoriate, he wants her to join him. She's not all that willing to be that man's servant, especially now that she knows what it feels like to fight with actual friends watching her back. Golbez isn't exactly surprised or disappointed by her answer since she doesn't matter all that much as far as his plans go. He knows you all came to save the dragon, and when you had first showed up, he'd planned on killing you right away. He's glad that he didn't since you ended up helping him in the long run by tearing open a very large void gate on the moon and giving Ashdaya hope that he could feed on. Now he can kill you all, and he gets started on that by letting Ashdaya out of his prison. She's instantly consumed by darkness and turned into a dragon void scent that attacks Vritra. He summons a lot of other void scent to deal with the Scions, and since he can tell that the two strongest people there are the dragon and the warrior of light, he goes to fight you himself on an arena that he lifts into the sky. Using your extremely useful summon allies from anywhere jutsu, the warrior of light brings in a group of warriors to help her take down the very large Golbez and his shadow dragon. As far as trials go, this one did a good job of becoming my favorite one in this expansion, because Golbez is not a slouch at all. That still doesn't stop him from getting wrecked and shrinking back down to the size of a normal 8 feet tall man. But you winning the fight didn't come fast enough, because Golbez had already set his plans into motion. In the past, there had been a lot of ether in the crater on the moon until it scattered all around the void. But like everything else on the shard, it couldn't pass on to the ethereal sea, so it slowly merged into a super powerful void scent that's been getting ready to wake up. Now that it has, Golbez throws Ashdaya to it. It absorbs the dragon and bursts out of the pit, having enough power to break through the barrier between the void and the source, so it can free the void scent from their prison of immortality. Since the thing will be the savior of their world, Golbez names it after a hero from ancient times, Zeromus. A monster made from the fusion of a shard of Zodiac and a great worm is nothing to laugh at, and it proves that when Zero tries to use her power to crystallize it, and he yeets her across the moon. Zeromus is letting off so much ether that the warding scales won't be able to protect you for much longer, so you all hop on the Vritra's back and do the only thing that you can, and that's flee for your lives. The fact that Golbez was able to use Ashdaya's hope as a power source to create a super void scent was not something that Y'shtola had predicted, but now you all have something that is way worse to deal with, but you can't deal with it without a plan, so you all get ready to head back to Razad Han after you go tell Urianger what happened. While it's pretty bad, Urianger points out that since your barrier around the void gate is made out of Zodiac's prison, it's more than strong enough to keep Zeromus from breaking through it, at least for a while. There's no way to know if the shield you made is as strong as Heidelin's original one. And you don't know how strong Zeromus is since he did eat a great worm and is made directly from a shard of Zodiac. Urianger will keep watch on it while you head back to Raz-Ad-Han to plan your next move. Losing Ashdaya has really done a number on everyone, but Zero points out that even though she got eaten, when a void sin is consumed it doesn't die, and if you kill Zeromus, Ashdaya can reform and be her old self again. She'll need something to help remind her of who she was, so Zero tells Vritra to stop moping around and get ready to call his sister once you all beat the super void sin. It'll be a little bit harder than just walking up and poking the thing a few times. Estinian thinks it'll be a better idea to just let Zeromus come to the source where it'll have less dark ether to draw on, and you can kill it for good. The only problem with that is that will kill Ashdaya too, so the only way to save her is to beat Zeromus on the void. Considering how easy it was for him to smack Zero, that may not be all that simple, but Y'shtola, being who she is, has already figured out a way to weaken the thing. Since it has a world full of darkness to draw on, you'll need a world full of light to counter it, and you just so happen to know a place that's full of it, the First. She doesn't know how to harness that either, but she's pretty sure she can figure it out. In the meantime, Estinian is going to head off and do some training, and Zero decides to join him, and I'm sure the fact that he works out shirtless only has a little bit to do with her decision. This concludes the story of the Dark Throne. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe. Donate if you can, and I'll see you all next time.